So hello everyone, a very happy new year to all of you who all are watching us today and hope you all are doing great and safe at your end. So first of all, let me welcome you all to the day one of pre-hackathon speaker sessions. Yes, of course, the Python week will be hosting live workshops, talks, discussions and an amazing virtual hackathon after the end of these workshops. And these all starts from today, that is 1st of January and will end on 10th of January. So now, moving on to the speaker session for the day. The topic is Up in a Flash with Flask. So what is Flask? Flask is the Python framework that is used for building truly amazing web applications. It has a modular and lightweight design. So basically, this session will guide you to learn the basics about Flask and how one can build it. And with that being said, let me introduce you all to our speaker for this session. We have Anubhav Singh joining us. Hey Anubhav,
Hey Siddharth, thanks for
how
having
are
me
you?
here.
Yeah,
I'm
the
good.
pleasure is all ours. So,
Okay.
Anubhav is an avid developer, Intel software innovator, also a data chem instructor, and Venkat Panchpakesan Memorial Scholar 2019. We welcome you, Anubhav, and look forward to your talk. The virtual stage is all yours.
Thanks a lot, Siddharth. And yeah, before I even start, can you get my PPT up, please?
Yep, sure thing. Here you go.
Yeah. Thanks. So yeah, once again, Happy New Year to everyone here, and that is probably something you will be hearing for the next 1 week or 10 days. So yeah, even my contribution is in here, right? So guys, we'll be talking today about Flask, right? Why do I say up in a flash with Flask, right? Why didn't I say just introduction to Flask? Because you guys are going to be having a hackathon very soon, and you will be building cool stuff. Probably, trying to prototype your ideas very quickly, bring them live very quickly, and have an application which runs very fast and does not take a lot of time for you to build. So all these things require you to be up in a flash, right? And there's a bit about me. You can I'll share my contacts later at the end of the slides. And now we start with why the topic, right? And this is the answer. Because Rome wasn't built in a day, but they probably could have if they had Flask back at that time, right? So yeah, if Rome were to be a software and they had Python and Flask at their disposal, they could probably have done it in a day. And that is very much possible, right? Because I remember I have created several softwares using Flask, which literally I did overnight, and they are running in production and producing huge output, both in terms of work done and the money earned. So yeah, probably Rome could have been built in a day or maybe overnight. Yep. Anyway, so what I want to say is speed is everything, right? When you are developing software from scratch, and you are in a startup, you have a startup idea, or maybe you just have an idea which is about to change the world. You want to make it come live very quickly, right? Because there goes a business mantra, not this one, right? So the business mantra says that think big, start small, and act fast. Because whatever idea you have, your idea will be huge. You will have a very huge idea, but then you can't, just build an entire mountain in a day. You will have to start putting small pebbles every day, and these pebbles will finally add up to the mountain, right? So you will have to start small, and you will have to act fast. If you have a great idea, right? This happened to me a lot of times. I had some great ideas, but I never acted on them fast enough. And when after 6 months of having the idea, I started working on it, I saw that someone else came up with the same product and they were doing wonders with their business. Right? So this happens. If you have an idea, if you want to go into a startup, or in a hackathon, you want to create something very quickly. So you'll have to act fast. You can't just keep on thinking about it. Acting fast. There goes a saying that the greatest chess player will probably never make a single move because he is thinking the entire game in advance, right? So don't be that greatest chess player. Be a good one and act fast. Now, this is what Flask offers you the most. The Ooda Loop. The Ooda Loop basically says that you first have to observe, right? Whatever problem you have, whatever situations you are in, your problem situation is in, you'll first have to observe it, right? Collect all the information you can about it, and just keep on collecting whatever information you can about the problem, about whatever conditions that you have in front of you. Just observe all of them and then sit down and orient them. Orient them basically says that whatever data you have collected, consolidate that into actionable data, right? This is the information that you need to build a solution for this, and then decide what are the things that you are actually going to do, because your solution could be very complex or massive, but you do not have to do that on the first day, right? You'll have to bring something which is basically the most minimal viable solution. So for doing that, you cannot just do everything at one go. You'll have to decide what needs to be done first, and then you have to do it, right? That is the act part. So you have to create the software, you have to get the minimum viable product live, and once you do that, there will be some reaction from the people who are going to use that software, whoever is going to use whatever services or products that you have built, maybe your customers, maybe your B2B clients, maybe your freelance clients. So whoever is going to use it, right, they will have some reaction to it, and then you have to again observe that reaction and orient your solution to their reactions, right? So this loop goes on, and this is what Flask offers you very nicely, because Flask takes minimal amount of time to act, right? A lot of people get stuck in the act part. People think of a good idea, they have all their plans sorted, they make all the right decisions, but finally they get stuck building the same application for an year, and someone else comes in and launches the same product in 6 months, and they grab the entire market, right? So you do not want that to happen with your idea, and Flask is the right framework or tool to build upon if you want to build things very quickly. And this is what happens, right? In real life, when the facts change, you have to change your mind. You can't just make one mind and go with it into the entire game, right? For example, if in a game of cricket, if the captain comes down with a certain idea that this is what we are going to do, we are going to score 300, we are going to bowl them out at 200, that's not going to happen. They may end up scoring 150 or maybe 36, who knows? And then you'll have to change your plan. So yeah, let's come to the main topic now. So what is Flask, right? You might be interested in knowing that. Just quickly, let me know how many of you already know what is Flask, or maybe have ever used it, or just done a hello world with it very quickly. Put that in the chat, please. And while you are doing that, I'll just proceed to the next slide. But yes, please keep doing that. And this is what I know about Flask, right? I won't go into the dictionary definition of Flask, that it's a micro framework, blah blah blah. I won't go into that. I'll just say if you need an API in 2 minutes, then Flask is the thing which you need, right? And yeah, this can probably be a big claim. Okay, so some of you have used it, some of you have not used it. That's fine. That's totally fine. And I'm just going to try to sell it to you, right? Perfect. Yeah, but I sure that you can actually get a API in 2 minutes. So let me just go ahead and prove it, right? If we can actually have a Flask API within 2 minutes, do you think it's possible? Anyone who what do you think is possible? A Flask API in 2 minutes? Let me know in the chat how many of you think it's possible. How many of you think it's impossible to have an API in 2 minutes? And then we are going to do a live race against time. Let's see how much time it takes. I'll be honest, I have not practiced it yet. I have not timed it or something like that. I just wrote that number 2 minutes by experience, and I'm going to see if I can capitalize on it. Maybe indeed yes. Okay, no one says no. People believe in me. That's good. Thank you. It is possible, and thing is, that's great. That's great. Cool. Let's go ahead and try it, right? I am going to stop this slide thing and I'll share my entire screen. Could be possible. Okay. Let's do that. Give me a minute. I'll share my entire screen. Guys, can you bring back my screen? Perfect. That looks great. So I have here. Okay, my screen is not visible, right? Is my
It is.
screen
It
visible?
is visible. Yep, it is.
Okay, great. So let's do one thing. Let's have a timer, right? And let's set it to 2 minutes. Perfect. And it started. Right. So let me create a droplet very quickly. Also, you'll have to factor in the time it takes for my CPU, sorry, my internet to show things, right? And I'll just put it to NYC3. I'll just use a password for it. No, I'm not going to use a password for it. I'm going to use, okay, cool. Let me use this key. And let's create a droplet. While the droplet is getting created, let me go to the shell. Oops, I made a mistake. What is the IP of the droplet I created just now? Let's see. Yeah, while that is happening, I did prepare some code beforehand. I put it in a gist. It's not a lot of code. It's basically a hello world of pipe Flask, and you can literally just copy paste it off the internet. And we still have 38 seconds to go. I am not sure if I'll be able to complete this, but yeah, worth the try. Let's go. Let's paste it here. Copy this. Cool. Oops, I don't have Python here. Ah, okay. I missed out on the time, but let's see how much. Okay, so I don't have tip. Yeah, I think I lost that one, but let's see how much time it's taking me, right? Okay. Let's see if it takes 5 minutes or something. I'm just going to give the excuse that this VM is slow. Yeah, and meanwhile, just don't keep looking at the timer. Also look at what I'm doing. Right? I created a droplet and then I made sure that Python is installed there. Yeah, the timer was low. Yeah, after that, I installed pip, which ideally should not happen on your already configured environment. So that should not be an issue. Mohammed Ayan, what I'm doing is basically I am trying to deploy Flask on a VM very quickly, as quickly as possible. But the VM is slow. It's stuck at 99. Use cloud. Yes, I am using cloud. Okay, so I'll leave this here because it's stuck kind of. Get back to the presentation and we will come back to this VM later, right? So where did my slides go? Oops. Perfect. So we will let this happen for a while. And once the terminal is ready, I'll show you the deployment. And yeah, after the configuration of the environment is done, it's really fast. So let's focus on who is using Flask today, right? And I won't gloss over it as a lot of people do when they're talking about a certain technology. That this is not the most popular software. That is very clear. Flask has a market share of 0.07%, and that's pretty less. I won't say that Flask is the most popular software or it is the best software out there for building APIs, but yes, Flask is one of the fastest for doing so, right? And let's see distribution of companies that use Flask based on the company size. How many employees they have based on that? What is the distribution of companies which use Flask? And if you see the companies which have uh, employees in the range of 10 to 200, or maybe if you can say 1 to 200, they have the maximum amount of users for Flask. At the same time, companies with employees more than 10,000, they have a lot of users of Flask. Why is that? Why do you think is that? In the middle range, you do not have a lot of companies. Sorry, a lot of companies using Flask. So why is that happening? When you have few people on the team, you are using Flask. When you have a lot of people on the team, you are using Flask. But when you have something in the middle, you are not using Flask. Why do you think that is happening? Again, if we look at the distribution of companies that use them based on their revenue size, you will again see the same trend. Companies with less revenue, they use it a lot. If you think of the range of 0 millions to 50 millions, right? So they're using Flask a lot, and then it's decreased in the range of 50 millions to 1000 million, and after that greater than 1000 million, it again increases rapidly, right? Why do you think this is happening? Can anyone give me an answer for this? Just make a guess. Why do you think this trend is happening? This trend of middle-sized companies not using Flask. Only the larger and smaller companies are using Flask. Why do you think that's happening? Anyone who has any kind of theory around this? Less resources, so they need to get it done quickly. Yes. So smaller companies have less resources. They need to get it done very quickly. That's correct. That's basically something I started off with. And because Flask is effective to work in a collaborative manner at low cost, I think by the users of GitHub, almost every piece of software today is easy to work with collaboratively. The money costs for other alternatives catch up in a big company. I think that is probably something which happens. I'm not very sure. I do have other ideas around that. Put a big dent in profit. Mhm. They have more employees than required. They have more employees than required. Um, are you trying to suggest that they have employees which are not needed? Be more efficient in short time. They choose to go on safer side and go for trendy tech. They have does faster work. Okay, fine. Let me see if I have an answer to that, right? And this is what makes the difference because when larger players are coming in, they have enough firepower to maintain microservices. Now, if you think about the microservices architecture, it basically means that whatever your application is doing, you're breaking it down into very small services, and all these small services can be maintained by individual teams or developers. And that is only possible when you have a lot of developers on your team, right? So the smaller companies, they have this maybe 2 3 people who are developing the entire thing, and they need to get things done very quickly. As said earlier, they need to get it done very quickly, and that's why they're using Flask. But when you come to mid-sized company, they don't have to do things very quickly. At the same time, they do not have so many extra employees that they can dedicate one employee to each small service, or maybe one team to each small service. They cannot do that. So that is why the mid-range companies, they fall out of this Flask uses. But later on, when you have a huge company, when you have a lot of employees, you just have the right amount of people to focus on all these small services, the microservices architecture. And that's where you take up Flask again, because Flask is one of the best tools for building microservices. And yeah, I'll be talking about why that is so. And yeah, let's see if you need Flask, right? That brings us to this question, because if you are a small player, if you are a big player, you're using Flask. If you are a mid player, you are not using it. So how do you decide if you need Flask today? These are the things which you need to factor in. You are either starting out, and or else you are looking to optimize. Now, by saying that you are looking to optimize, I do not mean you're optimizing your functions, or changing the way your loops are working, changing the queries. I don't mean that. I mean that your monolithic code has grown so large that it's impossible to maintain it. There is no one person who understands the entire code, and that can be really problematic, because if your developers do not have the idea about the entire application, how the small parts are interacting, then it's really not possible to take it forward very quickly. I have at times been part of projects which did not have people, or at least one or two people at the very top, who could not who knew the entire application. So it was really tough for us to take those software projects forward, because we used to change one file, and that used to break something else somewhere else, and we were like, I'm sorry, this happened, let me go and fix that. Once I went to fix that, something else broke. Right, this starts happening when your monolithic code becomes too large, and there's no one to tell you that please don't do this, otherwise that is going to break. Right, so this happens when your company grows larger. Employees come, employees go, and there's really no one left to tell you that, hey, do not change this, otherwise it's going to break. Right, so your monolithic becomes too large for anyone to wrap their head around it, for a single person to do that. And then you have a lot of these programmers at disposal, right? And when you have a lot of programmers at disposal, this tells two things about your company. First, that your company has a lot of resources, and the other thing, that you are probably doing good work and you need to optimize. Because when you have a lot of resources in your company, you are probably also catering to a lot of clients, or maybe doing something which requires a lot of optimization. And that is when you will need Flask. So once you know when you're starting out, have your thing done in Flask. In the middle, if it makes sense for you, migrate to something else. And once you have grown into a big company, you might want to come back. And here's when you don't need Flask. Your existing software is not in Python, makes sense. If your existing software is not in Python, it's going to be really very patchy kind of thing which you do to make your Flask thing integrated with it. And that's really not suggested by me, at least. Maybe somewhere someone else might say that, yeah, it's okay, but yeah, it's not a great idea according to me. And your focus is on stability than rapid delivery. Flask is something which comes bare bones, right? And there's a lot of stability offered in full-fledged frameworks which come with a lot of batteries included, and that does not happen with Flask. Flask comes bare bones, and you are really open to making mistakes. You might choose the wrong libraries, you might choose the outdated libraries which are not getting security patches anymore, and things might just stop working tomorrow. So if you are looking for stability rather than rapid delivery, then don't go for Flask. Also, you do not have enough hands for microservices. Microservices was quite the rage. A few years back, everyone was like microservices, microservices. But yeah, some people came in, and by experience, they said, please have some patience, because microservices is not everyone's cup of tea. You need to have a lot of people who can dedicate a lot of time to small parts of your application to get your microservices running and stable. Finally, in general, if you're bored with life, that is not actually a reason. I just wrote it because it looked cool anyway. Yeah, planning ahead for your Flask project, right? You need to plan ahead, because, as I said, Flask does not come with batteries included, and you need to plan a lot. Otherwise, you will, you know, with great flexibility comes great possibility of noodle code. So if you know noodle code, the times when we had that go-to function in our code, that was really the worst time of programming, I guess. But now we do not have it. Still, a lot of people manage to create noodle code, and that's really sad. Um, by a lot of people, I mean to say almost everyone. Even I do sometimes. I'm guilty to creating noodle code, and that is not something which should be happening. Right? Sometimes when I go back to my code, which is like 6 months back or maybe a year back, I really have no idea what's happening out there. Um, I see a function and I'm like, why is this here? And in general, whatever is shown on the screen. Anyway, so if you want to see good architecture, you need to take some inspiration from people who have actually put up softwares using Flask, which a lot of people have collaborated to, and it's actually running. So let me very quickly open, say, this mentorship backend by Anita Bob organization, and okay, let me see what happened there. Great. So if you look at this particular repo, it has some conventional files out here, requirements.txt, and then the proc file for deploying it on Heroku, Docker file for docker.env. Make sure to use .envs all the time. If you're not using .envs, you're doing a you know betrayal to yourself in future. So do not do that, please. Use .envs and organize your entire app in smaller parts, right? So they have created a app folder in which they have separated out the different modules. Let's say, let's go into their data API, and they have created models separately, they have created resources separately, validations are done in a separate folder. So all of this is good practice, right? You need to divide your code, because with Flask, the biggest problem which happens with Flask is you can entire your entire software can be wrapped into a single file. And though you might feel like doing it at times just to save your time, just to save the overhead of writing imports correctly, it's really a very bad practice, and that will eventually bring you down. I did that once. I created a Flask file of approximately 1000 lines and containing almost 50 to 60 functions, different functions. And trust me, maintaining it is a nightmare. Even today, I am using that script, and sometimes I just want to split it apart into multiple components, but I'm not getting the time to. But yes, I should have done that. That's a beginner mistake which you guys should not be making. As soon as your length of file starts increasing, start breaking it down into modules. And if not into modules, then you can break it down like the DAO models, resources, validations. You can even break it down like this. There are other ways of breaking down. As I said, modules can be used the way Django uses. If anyone has ever used Django, then Django has these smaller applications which join together to form the entire software. And inside each of those smaller applications, they have their own validations, they have their own testing, they have their own models and admins defined. So that is one way of breaking down software. The other way is this, that you break it down into models, resources, validations. This is basically the way frameworks like Laravel work, or Symfony. So all those frameworks work like this. And once I go into models, they have these small models, right? They have again broken it down into submodules of, say, admin, mentorship relation, and user. So this is actually a very good thing to do. Um, have you ever used Amazon AWS? Yes, I have used AWS. Django is for big apps. Django is definitely the better choice for bigger apps, because Django offers a very stable kind of working environment in which you have things predefined, in which you have proper rules given that this is how you should be doing it, right? So Django is really good for larger applications. But again, as I said, when you are a small company and you are just starting out, you do not want to go into all that which Django brings in. For creating a hello world in Django, you will need like 20 files, and for creating a hello world in Flask, you literally just need one, right? Okay, so this broke. Let me get back there. Oops, not this one, not this one. Yeah. So now come back. Let's come back to some common conventions, and I hope my slides starts from there. Yeah. So you can go through all these links. All these links will be available in the slide deck shared to you. The slide deck will be shared to you by the organizers. Cool. So Flask is mostly used for building REST APIs, right? Flask is not usually used for building applications the way you did with say PHP, or creating websites which have a front end integrated into it. So Flask is really not meant for that. Even though you can do it, it's really not done much. If you are just focusing on creating APIs with not much HTML output, then Flask is a very good choice. Use doc strings inside your Python code. Make sure you use doc strings, because you can literally just then use one or two commands to generate an entire documentation, and that is very helpful. If you want to understand what's doc strings, you can go to the sample repositories which I shared, and all of them are actually using doc strings. So you can just take a look at those, and then break down your app into modules and submodules. Like I just said this just now, that don't make your Flask project monolithic, because that's really the worst way of doing things. In Flask, you want it to be broken down into modules and submodules, because that is really going to make your life easier when you move ahead with your project, and you won't really quickly have to switch to some other framework or language. If you want your Flask project to run for a long time, break it down into modules and submodules. If your Flask application does not have to run for a long time, maybe you're creating it for some demo purpose, maybe you're creating it for probably an application which is not going to change for a long time, maybe one or two changes in 6 months, so it's fine. You can let it stay whatever condition you want it to be in, but otherwise make sure to break it down. And yes, go ahead and use relative imports. There are two ways of importing files in Python, the modules and submodules. And I will always suggest to use relative imports, very similar to how Django does it. You can search about relative imports in Python and get an understanding of what that is. Also have a common naming of submodules, right? This is something which I have directly taken from Django, how Django does it. Breaking down things into modules, and inside each of the modules you have common naming conventions, and that is really helpful if you are building a larger software, right? Say for example, you build a software of say something similar to PayPal, right? So PayPal will have users, it will have transactions, and it will probably have companies. So if you wanted to define models for each of these, you could do it in two ways. You can create a models.py file, and you can put all these three models in there, or else you can create modules named user, transactions, and companies. And inside all these three modules, you can create submodules called models.py, and in each of them you just define that one particular model, right, for corresponding to the users, corresponding to the transactions, or corresponding to the companies, right? So that will be much easier, because in future when a new developer comes in, when you hire someone or your team and you tell them, hey, go and edit the user model, then the person knows what to do, right? If you tell him to in future edit the transactions model, he understands that yes, there will be a transaction folder. Inside that there will be a file called model.py. I just have to go in and I have to change one particular model there, right? That makes things easier in future aspects. So you want to do that. You want to use relative imports, and do not go into absolute imports, because it might happen you're copying over your code and it's making a absolute import, and you do not have the idea of an error till something really breaks. So relative imports are really good. Use them. And finally, coming to deploying your Flask app, and this is what I was trying to do some time back. I'll probably show it to you again. And this is the basic logic, right? If it can run Python, it can run Flask. Someone was asking me that you have done HTML websites. What am I doing? VMs and all. So this is what I was doing. I was trying to get a place where Python can run, and wherever Python can run, it can run Flask. So that was what I was trying to do. If you think that you can deploy your Flask app to GitHub pages, that's going to be really hard, or let's say impossible in current date. So find a place where Python can run. And there are some places. You can go to pythonanywhere.com and just put your code in there as it is, and that will start running. Otherwise, you can go to Heroku, and in Heroku, you will need this prop file in which you define which runtime. You basically define the runtime and what commands have to be used, and you can deploy it on Heroku. Otherwise, you can go for cloud VMs. Cloud VMs, by cloud VMs, I mean Amazon AWS or GCP cloud compute engines. You also have the app engine, so you can use that as well. There's different terminologies for cloud VMs all over. That's really up to you what you're using. All you need is a web server, and yep, enough slides. Let's have the real deal. Let's go ahead and create a small Flask app and deploy it to production. Right. What I did earlier was I created a very small Flask code. I think it was here. Let me search. Just github.com. Flask hello world. Let's see how a Flask code looks like, right? This is how it goes. From Flask, import Flask, you basically import the entire Flask module. And then you create an app using that particular Flask object. And then you define everything in your app object, right? So we defined a root called slash. And in slash, we have put a function called hello, and that just returns hello world. And here we have just said that when this particular file is executed, we have to run this app, and when this app runs, whatever route we are hitting to, that particular route will respond accordingly. And this is the entire code. Let's see how we can deploy it. Let me SSH into the server I created some time back. We should have run the timer from here, I guess, right? I would have literally shown you the deployment within 30 seconds. I don't know. Anyway, let me enable UFW. Oops, can do that. Cool. So what I did just now, let me try zooming this. Yeah, what I did just now was, first of all, I went into the VM and I allowed open SSH because I have done an SSH to the server. And then I created a rule of allowing port 80. Port 80 is basically where HTTP runs most of the time. Though we are not going to use it, I just showed it to you for demonstration purpose. We are going to use port 8000, and we have to allow that particular port as well. Now that we have allowed all the three things, I'm going to enable it. Why? Great. So now we have the firewall running. Rahul, UFW is basically a utility in Linux for firewall, right? So I just closed all the other ports and I opened the port for OpenSSH, port 80 for HTTP, and port 8000 for our demo running server, right? And let me see, do we have the file here? And we have this app.py file here with Flask in it, the entire code which I showed you just now. And let me try running it. I still do not have Flask. 3 install Flask. That's it. Flask got installed, and now I just run this. Okay, so now it's running on 127.0.0.1 5000. So there's an issue here. Okay. Anyway, so there's an issue here that the server is running on 127.0.0.1. That should not be happening. And it's also running on a port which we are not interested in. Let me close this and I will edit the file. And let me quickly change the host and port where it's running. The host should be 0.0.0.0 and the port should be 8000. That should be a number. And let me try running it again. Now it's running on 8000 port, and I'll explain very quickly why we have to run it on 0.0.0. There's a very small thing which is going on here, but let me first quickly check whether our server is up. And there you go, hello world, right? Also, you'll get a response on your Flask terminal that there was a GET request, HTTP GET request on the slash root, and the response was 200. That means that someone came in and requested the slash resource, and we were able to respond that person correctly using the 200 code. That basically means the code worked, right? Now, this is one way of deploying it. Also, this is not the real deployment, right? This is a Flask debug server. So this is not a deployment server. You have this big warning out here. For the actual deployment, you will need to configure Nginx and run this server through Gunicon. You will have to create a log file using Gunicon, and that daemon file will be connected to the proxy of Nginx, and Nginx will be responding to all the code, right? That said, that said, I did have a question that should we listen to you because I do not know what to do. So, Mohammed, I'll just try to clarify to you what I have done right now. I took some Python code off the net, and you can actually write it off your own. I created a Flask app and deployed it so that we can access this particular Flask application through public internet. For doing that, I had to use a VM on DigitalOcean. So I created the VM here. You are really fine to go ahead and use other services like Linode or Vulture. Vulture actually has a very nice offering of a 2.5 USD or maybe 3 USD server, which allows you to literally do anything on it. It's a very small server, maybe 512 MB RAM. So you can go ahead and do that as well. You can choose your server, and once you have your code ready, my code was in here, right? So this was the code I was using, and I deployed that code on my DigitalOcean server, and I made it run on port 8000. And this is the public IP which I got allotted by DigitalOcean. So this is what's happening right now, right? So in very small words, this is how Flask works. Flask is basically a script running, and that one script is responsible for answering to all the queries which are coming to that particular server on whichever port Flask is listening. You can make it listen on 80 using Nginx. That's it. Now let's come back to what else you can do with Flask, right? So displaying all this hello world and all is fine, but what really can be done with Flask, right? Let me show you some interesting code. So recently I got into a problem in which I had to create a software in which I was supposed to, I was not told which tables we are going to use or which collections in terms of MongoDB. And that was the real problem, that I did not know what are the names of the collections that we are going to use in MongoDB. But we had to perform some actions on it, like inserting data, taking out data, or editing the content. So things like that had to be done. So using Flask, I built a very quick wrapper around PyMongo, which allowed me to literally entirely control the entire MongoDB installation just using a few lines, right? And this is what I built. Let me go ahead and show you the entire code. Let's do a breakdown of this, right? If we have time, let's do a breakdown of this. I just have one file here. Notice that the entire server has just one file, and it allows me to completely control the entire MongoDB installation, right? Now let me open this app.py file and let's see what I did here. So I made some imports. I imported Flask, that is the major thing. And then I also imported PyMongo, which was needed. You'll be needing cores if you are going to hit this particular server with some application running on a different server or a different domain. So all these things imported, I created the Flask app and enabled cores on it. And then I came down and I defined some functions, right? So I defined this slash root home says hello to the world. By the way, these things you're seeing here, there's strings in triple quotes. This is what I meant by doc strings. So yes, this is actually a good code. And then there are functions which listen to certain routes, and then you can also define the methods which Flask is listening to. This is very important because not all APIs need to have all the methods enabled on them. At the same time, different methods can invoke different action from the API. For example, if you have a certain collection, and I made the collection name generic, so if you have a certain collection and you do a post to it, then that particular item should be created in the collection, right? If you look at this code using Mongo, what I'm doing is insert one. When I did a post request to that particular collection name's root, it did an insert request, right? But when I'm going to do just a get request, what it's going to do is return me all the items in that collection, right? So all of this is happening using this 156 something lines of code, and this entire code wraps around all the functionalities offered by MongoDB, right? So this really makes life easier as a developer if you want to connect to your MongoDB installation remotely and through authentication, right? So 150 lines of code and you are ready to go. This is what Flask has to offer you, that in very less amount of code you can do a lot of things, right? And that is where I will stop speaking. So we can have, I guess, some questions. Yep.
All right. So, yep. So let's take few questions. We do have few of them in the chats. Let me just bring that up.
Sure.
And meanwhile, everyone can just, ask all your questions in the live chat and we'll be answering them on the live stream at the moment. So there was one question. It says like, have you done port forwarding?
No, I did not do port forwarding here because really didn't need it, right? I just wanted to show you that Flask was running. I did not have to make it run on a specific port, so I did not do port forwarding here. That is a OS concept. That is not a Flask or Python concept.
Yeah. Also, Aryan had one question that which is better, Spring or Flask?
I've really not used Spring, so I'll not be able to give a good answer to that.
All right. Also, we have another question. It says like, have you ever used Amazon AWS, or if you want to tell some of that features which you can use for the multiple features over whatever you have used in today's session.
Yeah, so I have used Amazon AWS, and uh, to be honest, all cloud VMs are at the end the same thing, right? Once you have the cloud VM deployed, you just have to SSH into it and start doing your stuff. There's really no difference between a cloud VM created by AWS or GCP or DigitalOcean. There's really no actual difference in terms of a programmer. But if you have to optimize it, then you just have to think about the costing and stuff like that. That's truly not a worry of the developer. That's a worry of the uh, owners of the company who have to actually spend on that. So yeah,
Absolutely. Yep. Another question we have, Django is for big apps, right? So,
yeah, Django is much better for the bigger applications because Django provides a standard way of doing things. Right? There's a lot of configuration options in Django which are not present in Flask, and you're free to make mistakes. As I said, that with more flexibility, you are more prone to making mistakes. Flask allows you to make those mistakes. Django tries to stop you from doing those, and it's really hard to make mistakes in Django. So that's really much better for larger applications, which you have some time to build without taking shortcuts and all, which Flask allows you to do. You can put in very bad code and be fine with it in Flask. Django won't let you do that.
yeah, absolutely. Well said. Also, there was one more question, which is the best framework for building API?
In my opinion, Flask is really the best one because whenever I have to quickly build APIs, I go for Flask. Hands down, Flask.
Yeah. Also, Ansh was asking that what would be the best resources for backend?
The best resources for for backend, as in with Flask or with some other language, because that really depends. If you think about backend in general, if you want to get started very quickly with a large application, then PHP has a lot of stuff out there, right? If you think about, say, you want to start a SaaS-based business tomorrow, and you just want to rip off code from the internet and get started with it. Flask may not have that, but PHP will definitely have it. And a lot of good PHP code is already out there in the world. You can just go ahead and download it and start deploying your stuff, start building your whatever startup idea you have. So if you think about backend in general, then you do not have to get stuck with Python. You can also go and look at other languages. There's a lot of good code out there for Ruby, Ruby on Rails, and there's a lot of good code out there for Go. A lot of good stuff is done on .NET. So that's really a very generic thing. But if you're specifically talking about Python, then uh, using Flask, use Flask, create REST APIs. Try not to make huge code, break it down into modules, submodules, and things like that. So all those things which I mentioned in the convention section of my slides.
Great. So Suhas was asking whether Flask is used to break your code and maintain it efficiently.
Yes, Flask is in a way used to break down code. Once you have, say, for example, if you have a company which has a big product, right? A product with a lot of moving parts, a lot of submodules, and there's one particular module which is not performing well, it's becoming a bottleneck in the entire application. Then what you can do is you can take offline that module from the rest of the application, and you can just make a microservice out of it. So once you make a microservice, you are literally destructuring the application, breaking it down into parts. So Flask can definitely be used for that, and that actually shows in the graph which I showed to you, right? Why are bigger companies using Flask more? The reason is that they are breaking down their applications into microservices. So if you are thinking about Flask as something for breaking down your application into microservices, then yes, you can do that.
All right. Also, Rahul had like the continuous question to what he asked before. So he was asking that were you actually doing port forwarding using UFW?
No, I was not doing port forwarding using UFW. UFW is just a firewall, right? It's a very simple kind of firewall provided in Linux systems, and I was just opening the ports. So you saw that I went to enable UFW, but then I stopped that, right? I canceled that operation, and then I opened some ports, and then then I enabled UFW. That is what I was doing. I was opening the ports before starting the firewall, because if I had not opened port 22 and started the firewall, then my SSH connection would be immediately terminated and I would be thrown out. So that is what I was doing. I was creating a firewall around the VM and opening specific ports which I needed. That is a security measure which you may or may not take in your everyday life or maybe in hackathon life. But yeah, that is definitely one thing which you should keep in mind, that security is a big issue.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. Also, what if two functions has the same route?
Yeah, if two functions have the same route, then the one okay, then there's also one thing. Do they have the same methods, right? Because if your same routes have different methods, then based on the method which you have provided, they will be responding accordingly. I think even in the Flask code which I was showing, the one about MongoDB, there was this campaigns route which I showed you, right? In which the campaigns route both had a post method and a get method. So based on the HTTP method, it was responding. Otherwise, if you have the same method as well and the same route as well, then uh, in my opinion, it should be something erroneous. Most likely, the one which comes later on in the code, it should be run. But I don't think I don't think Flask is going to allow you to do that. It's probably going to throw up an error while you are trying to run it. It should throw up
Mhm.
an error. I've never done that personally. Like never had the idea of doing that.
All right. So talking more about Flask, and also we discussed some bit of Django. So here's one more question: that do we need to define database in Flask, or does it come pre-built like Django, which uses as Sqlite?
Hmm. That's really a very good question because yeah, that's something you will be needing all the time, right? When you are building an application which has any kind of stored data logic, so you are going to need a database. And no, Flask does not come with SQLite, though you can integrate Flask with almost any database much faster than you can do with Django.
Hmm.
Configuring databases with Django takes a bit more time than it takes with Flask.
Absolutely. We have one more question. Says like, can we have Google clone in Flask?
Uh, nice. So no, that is not a bad question. That is a really good question. And to be honest, I recently developed a system which massively crawls like a million links per day, and it stores them, indexes them, produces output out from it, and gives it back to a particular endpoint. It was a freelance project for a client, so yeah, I do not store that data on my side, but yes, I believe that if we do the indexing part and the crawling part with Flask, that is really not an issue. But maybe for returning the results, you might want to do something else because you want to return search results very quickly. Once the query is typed in, you want it to be quickly, churned and returned with a good number of good amount of relevancy. So Flask may not be the best thing there, but for the indexing and crawling purpose, I have used Flask, and Flask is amazing in doing that.
Yeah. Next, we have what would you call a React counterpart in Python?
A React counterpart in Python. There's something called Kiwi. I'm not sure if you have heard of it. It's Kivy. So Kiwi is used to build um, cross-platform UIs using Python, and yeah, the output is really beautiful using Kiwi. Though I have not built huge softwares using it, I have done just hello world apps using Kiwi. But I think if you talk about cross platform nature of React, then Kiwi is probably the closest one. Besides that, Python is not really a front end language the way JavaScript is, so it's really not possible to have a complete React counterpart using Python. The day
Yeah,
Python starts running in the browser, it will be possible.
definitely. Also, like many of the attendees who were watching us had this question that if they are beginner, what are the best resources they can start with, or what is the platform they can start with? So, would you like to suggest some?
All you have to do is search for Flask tutorials, right? There's tons of tutorials out there for Flask because Flask is one of the most popular libraries among Python developers who are into web development, and you will literally get ocean of content around how to get started with Flask. So just go ahead and Google it up. A good place for me to start off with was Tutorials Point. I always do a quick refresher of all the technologies I am trying to learn using Tutorials Point, and it's always proved good. Besides that, you can also learn Flask from their official documentation. They have a tutorial sorts of on their website, so you can also go through that. These are the two official resources which I'll mention: that Tutorials Point, Flask tutorial, and the Flask documentation. So besides these, you are really free to go and search and use anything. There's a lot of content out there for Flask.
Yeah. Also, Rutvik had two questions that he was asking: can we make a software maker software? And the other one was that can we make proper Jarvis program? So these were the two questions.
So building a software maker using Flask, if you are talking about a software making on a website, um, see, nothing is impossible, right? If you talk about programming, everything is possible. You just have to wrap your head around how you're going to do that. So, if you think about, say, you build an interface in which you drag and drop some elements, and later on you can convert it to a proper native application using Python. That's totally possible because Python can build application for all the operating systems, the major operating systems. So Python can be useful there. I'm not sure how much useful Flask will be in it, but Python can definitely create a software, make it software. Yes, that is possible with Python. Not so sure with Flask because I'm not sure how you will integrate a web server concept with that. And for a proper Jarvis program, if you think you are going to use that particular Jarvis program from some other place, as in using it over the internet, then you will definitely need some sort of method of establishing communication between your public network and wherever you are. So you will need a web server for that, and you can deploy Flask there. Besides using Python, a lot of people have attempted to create general AIs. That's what we call these Jarvis-like programs, the generic AIs which try to answer everything that is thrown at them. So definitely that is possible. If you can build it, go ahead. I will never say that it's not possible. It's truly possible, and you're encouraged to try that.
That was a great one. Also, like there's one more question I can see in the chats. If other than that, if anyone have any question, feel free to add those questions in the live chats. Meanwhile, Anubhav answers this one, that how to merge Flask with React.js.
Perfect. So this is something which you will need to do in your hackathon. You will probably have your backend running on Flask or maybe any other backend language, and you will probably want to build very beautiful UIs very quickly. And React.js is very good at that. So you can, as I mentioned earlier, that Flask is most suitable for building APIs, and that is what you're going to do. You're going to build REST APIs, and you're going to integrate those REST APIs with your React.js frontend, and that is something which we recently did at DSC. I can probably show you that. Can you share my screen, please?
Yep, sure.
Yeah, let me. Okay, I need to share my window, right? So I'll do that.
All right.
Application window. So let me share a tab.
Okay, we can see that now.
Okay. So if you look at this, uh,
Okay, I guess it's like still we can see you have to. Okay, now we can see the repo.
perfect, perfect. So if you look at this OMG Frames API, right? So we were working on this project called OMG Frames. You saw that project in DSC OMG last year when we, allowed you to build your I was at DSC OMG that frames. So we are taking that project forward, and right now it is using a Flask backend, and this backend is hosted at this place, and that is totally written in Flask, and the front end is using Bootstrap, right? The front end is hosted on GitHub pages, and the back end is hosted on DigitalOcean. They are hosted at two different places. We have just built REST APIs, and okay, this is not the one. Sorry, uh, OMG frames. Yeah, this is the one. And the front end has been written with pure HTML, CSS, JavaScript using Bootstrap, jQuery, things like that. And even that is working. Right? So you'll have to go to develop branch, and you can see that the new code which is running. And yeah, this is how you can build your React application as well. Create your front end in React, deploy it on GitHub pages, and connect it to the API whichever you have put through Flask. Right? That's really very simple. You can try that anytime. If you're using REST APIs, it's a no nonsense thing.
Yep. Also, like, do you have any suggestions for first year students? It's like mostly common with respect to the beginners, but yeah, anything specifically for first year students?
For first year students, my first suggestion is always that you know explore as much as you can, because you probably just started looking at things and you came into college, you saw a lot of people doing a lot of cool stuff. There are some people who are building rockets, and there are some people who are singing and dancing. So go ahead and explore all of it, right? Don't get uh, into this mindset that you have to do a specific thing which a specific senior is doing. Don't do that mistake. Explore whatever you like. In my first year, um, you know I learned Python. That was in the first year, 2016. So I learned Python then, and I also went and explored the dramatics club. I also became a part of the sports club. I also was a part of the cultural annual event which we had at our college. So I literally did everything, right? I went into robotics, I went into cybersecurity, I did everything, and finally I decided what is my niche. So yeah, explore everything, and whatever really hits your core, just stay with it.
Yeah, that's very true because it's not that you need to only focus on single thing. Of course, exploration really matters.
So like we are
Yeah.
talking about Flask, Python, all of that here, and it's going to be really opinionated, right? Because it's not going to be
Hmm.
about anything else. We are just going to say Python is great, Flask is great. It does not have to be great for you. It has to be great for us because we are speaking about it. This event is about it, but it's really up to you. What feels great to you is what you should be doing.
For sure. Also, Rutvik, I have another question. He's asking, what if we make a kit software? Like he's asking different softwares. I'm not
I'm
sure
not
about.
sure what is a kit
Yeah.
software.
Yeah, exactly.
If it is
Maybe
a
Rutvik,
software
yeah.
for
If you can elaborate the same in the chats, it would be great.
yeah. So I'm whom we can teach anything in our own language. So you're
Okay.
basically saying that a software which learns probably things like that. If you take the example of Alexa or Siri or Google Home, you can teach them a few things, right? You can teach them your name, your pet's name, your pet's name. So all of that you can teach your these assistants. So that is actually kind of a software which is a child which you are teaching. So definitely it can be built with Flask or whatever backend you have in your mind. It totally can be done. Yes, you can create a software which learns as you teach it. Yes.
All right. So I don't see any other questions yet in the chats. If in case, guys, if you have any questions, feel free to add them in the live chat. And if in case you do not have at the moment, feel free to ask your questions in the Discord itself. That is hashtag Ask Speaker channel, and Anubhav will be watching out for those questions and will be answering maybe later part of the day or maybe next coming weekdays, right? So yes, I cannot see anything. Yes, so thanks a lot, Anubhav. It was indeed a great session and had a lot to learn, of course. And as I said, participants may ask questions in the Discord as well afterwards. So make sure you check that out once. And I do have one questions from my end for you, that that we will be hosting 48 hours of virtual hackathon on the coming weekend, right? So do you have any suggestions for absolute beginners or any intermediate, because there are variety of hackers joining us, right
Mhm.
from the beginners to experience as well. So do you have any tip or suggestions for them which you would like to just give them that they can implement in the hackathon period?
Surely, I think this is something which a lot of people may have told you guys earlier as well. That once you're in a hackathon, don't try to build an entire enterprise software. You just have to build a proof of concept, and proof of concept can be minimal, right? You think about the way you used to prove equations in mathematics. You did the least number of steps that it took to prove that thing, right? You did not go roundabout. You did not go into inventing number theory, right? So that's what you need to focus on while in a hackathon. Just boil it down to the smallest number of things which you need to do to make a point that yes, this is my idea and it works. Boil it down to the smallest part and execute that, just that, nothing else, right? Don't go into implementing a lot of security into your application. Don't go into implementing entire new database in your application. Don't go into things like that. Use the products which you have available, use open source repositories, just patch them together, make it work, and put a good presentation.
Yeah, so these were some valuable suggestions, of course, and it would be a great help for all the hackers. And yes, at the end, thanks a lot for joining us today. It was like a great session, wonderful it was, and thanks for your time.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Siddharth. If you can share the screen which I'm sharing right now, that will
Yeah,
actually help the participants connect to me later. And yeah, that is all from me. Thanks a lot, Siddharth. Thanks a lot to the audience. And thanks a lot to all the people who had all these amazing questions. And a special mention for Rutvik that, yeah, even if others tell you that your questions are funny or not good, don't listen to them, right? Just put them all aside and keep working on whatever you are working, whatever crazy ideas you have, because these crazy ideas are actually going to make all the difference in your life.
yeah, very true. All right, then. Thanks, Anubhav. We'll see you later.
Sure.
Take care. Bye bye.
Thank you. Good luck with the rest of the event. Bye.
Bye bye. All right. So also everyone watching us, do fill the feedback form that is shared in the chat section, and it will also be used to assign the certificate for this session. And it will be only open for 15 minutes. That is 1 5 15, and it won't be reopened again. So make sure you fill out that form. And also all the people who are asking for the filler session, it will be from tomorrow onwards. We do not have any filler session for the day, but yes, definitely we'll be having some great filler sessions, some fun filler sessions from tomorrow onwards. So make sure you visit us tomorrow itself. And yes, we are coming up with another session right at 5 p.m. today. So make sure you attend that. We'll be sharing all the links in the Discord announcement channel. And yes, thanks a lot everyone for joining in today. Keep an eye on our social media for next sessions, and don't forget to subscribe the channel so that you can get the updates for all the workshops coming up ahead. And yep, stay tuned. Hope to see you in the next sessions. Take care. Bye bye.